Perfect. Right. Hi, everybody. Show and Tell Council Highlights 2023. Thank you to everybody who has submitted their council highlights. Much appreciated. And to all of the effort put in to presenting that everybody's put in already. Yeah, as I said, this is the last highlights for the year. It's the last Show and Tell for the year. So what we have decided to do is we're going to spend a few minutes just going through. I will hand over to each council just to give an update for what the highlights have been for 2023 and any hopes for 2024. So what I'll do is this is a running order. So I will announce Southwark very quickly. And then what we'll go through and do is apologies, I'll hand over to each council in turn. It is a very quick 5-minute update. So if we could keep to 5 minutes, that would be amazing. And then we'll hand over to Plan X for their update and then finish with Matt for DLAC. So Southwark in 2023, Southwark have received 50 Plan X lawful development certificates along with going live. Their web service gets 200 visitors a week, and their first BOPS group testing session, which is now happening, to provide valuable metrics on real cases. I know this has been a huge win for Southwark, and they really have done well with their communications out around it, and made my job a lot easier. So absolutely perfect. Really happy for them. And in the hopes in 2024, more Plan X services across the department, more BOPS familiarisation sessions. I know those are already in the planning for them. And then to run more volume testing sessions with other application types. So I know that they've already got a lot of legwork in with that. But it's great to see that they've had such a successful year. So huge claps to them. And then we're going to go into Camden. Ian, do you want to talk through your slides?
Yep. Hi. So it took us a little while to get going, but as of the beginning of 2023, we formally started our digital planning team. And subsequently, it's taken us a little while, but Find Out New Planning Permission, the Plan X guidance service is going to be going live imminently. We also spent most of kind of late spring, summer procuring the supplier for phase 3 of the digital site notice, which is now underway, and almost immediately a new MVP has been created so that we can start user testing with Lambeth. The point being, Lambeth is a use case to see if it can be rolled out across other councils that use Uniform. We have a BOPS production environment ready for testing. My colleague Amy is the product owner for that. And as for 2024, we're looking to roll out and scale the digital site notice from Lambeth to other councils that use Uniform, just kind of sell the idea more widely. And accept applications through Plan X. I think once Find Out New Planning Permission goes live, that will be quite quick, to be honest with you. And then following that, processing apps through BOPS. And then we've been doing a bit of this in 2023, but certainly more in 2024, working with the planning data team to work on design standards, which will kind of underpin all of this work. Yeah, so that's Camden.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And in Newcastle, do we have a Duncan?
Hi, Chanel.
Hello, Duncan.
Yeah, it's a bit like Eurovision, isn't it? So in Newcastle, in terms of 2023, I think it's worth saying that currently we don't have Plan X or BOPS services live, but we just wanted to give you a flavour and share with you our learning and our insights from being a key member and part of the growing ODP community. So I think we've gained a better understanding of what good looks like, and more importantly, how to get there. So that's underpinned by the agile principles, the collective ways of working that we're adopting. I think being a member of ODP has helped us to mitigate the challenge of many problems and scarce resources faced by all of us these days by identifying the common problems, the user needs, the solutions, and the ability to select our level of participation from initiator, leader, active partner, product tester, keen watcher, interested adopter, so on and so forth. We've expanded our ability to collaborate internally and externally because we're more readily connect the dots. So we understand, the importance of data and data standards, software, planning systems, and the relationship management that connects it all. We've started to get under the skin of Plan X, and we've built a local householder validation checklist prototype, which turns potentially a 67-page document into a 10-minute checklist that you can run through. We've supported the report breach group to grow and develop. We've helped form slightly outside of ODP, we're part of the community. We've helped form a self-organising group of LPAs to collaborate, and that's gained positive traction and buy-in and engagement from not just the LPAs, but the supplier. We've spun out into work with citizen engagement, digital citizen engagement, and that's led us into doing some case demonstrator work with Alan Turing Institute and the Geospatial Commission, which has been really, really exciting and interesting. It's also led us to do some work with other partners and prepared a case study for a plan and data discovery, which we're really keen to get off the ground if we can. Next slide, please. In terms of 2024, subject to final approvals, we anticipate we're going to launch Plan X. Find out if you need planning permission guidance service, report a breach, and our local householder validation checklist. We'll continue to work on APIs and integration. We hope to get closer to BOPS as it's built out further. We're going to host an ODP Aware Day here in Newcastle at some point in 2024. On a policy planning level, we are commissioning a site assessment tool and a healer. So that's quite exciting for the policy team and our planning team as we look to commission that and launch that. That is it, Chanel.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That sounds so exciting. Moving on, Lambeth. Who have we got from Lambeth?
You've got me. It's Greg here. Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
Greg.
For our highlights 2023, gosh, I didn't know really where to start there. We've put our engagement with the staff as our number one highlight. One, because the days were a lot of fun for us, but two, it's just so important getting all this amazing feedback and buy-in from our planning officers, and we just wanted to thank them for everything that they've done to help us with these projects. As our second highlight, we're just seeing some great results and feedback from live use of Plan X and BOPS, including some really amazing time savings. Last quarter, roughly 70% of residents chose to use our LDC apply for service, which we thought was amazing. And if mirrored with our other services coming live, like our householders, that would just be a phenomenal result for us. And we've been doing A/B testing as well, and been seeing time savings of up to 45% for officers if they use BOPS over our Lambeth's existing processes. And then finally, just our other highlight is just all the progress from BOPS Plan X. And I suppose I should have put digital site notices in there as well. And I know we're just moments away from launching householder services, which will be really exciting highlight for 2023. For 2024, Lambeth is I've been saying this for a couple of months now, but it's true. We are seconds away from launching Find Out If You Need Planning Permission. Cannot wait to see the benefits that other councils have been feeding back that they've been receiving for that. And of course, we'll be launching in the new year the digital site notices project, which is led by Camden. Thank you for including us. It's just a superior way of engaging with residents, and it just makes getting feedback from residents so much easier to process and understand. And then finally, Lambeth is always looking for the next thing to be involved with. Duncan, I saw your data discovery and I've put a note to query you about that. For some of the other ideas Lambeth have, we've just been looking at potentially even ways to, we've put some round 4 funding bids in. So if they're successful, I'll let you know what Lambeth is up to then. Thank you for having us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see what happens in 2024. Okay, Doncaster. David?
Thanks, Chanel. Morning, everybody. So just quickly, just a bit of an update from what's been the most successful thing in Doncaster, I think, this last year. In January, we launched our Find Out If You Need Planning Permission service. It was really well received by members of the public. We regularly see over 600 users per month, and approximately half of those users continue on to the end of the service to click on the next steps button, which then guides them to the appropriate place to submit a planning application if that's what they need to do. So it previously also, it replaced our discretionary officer-led advice service that was really being overrun with submissions, and as a result we were sort of consistently failing to hit assessment timescales. Shortly before we launched Find Out If You Need Planning Permission, it had been agreed at a senior level that that service had to be withdrawn. So really deployment of Find Out If You Need Planning Permission came at the perfect time to win support from senior leadership team and portfolio holders as well. And then also as a result of launching Find Out If You Need Planning Permission, we've seen an increase in LDC applications to approximately double the amount that we received at the same time last year. So yeah, really great service, well received and doing well. Can you just go on to the next slide, Chanel, please? And the next one after that. Yeah, so the other one of our main focuses over the last year has been the digitisation of what we call removed permitted development rights as a GIS layer. So these were originally identified as one of the key data sets in PlanX, and we've been working closely with colleagues in planning data on the development of these. So in cases where permitted development rights have been removed as a result of a planning application, that data is often hidden away in the details of individual applications. We've been working to extract that data from historic records, which are often handwritten on paper documents or microfiche records, I'm sure most of you will know. And we've been using keyword searches for the most part to try and do that. So it's been a great success so far. We're now in the process of publishing this data as a GIS layer on our mapping system, and we've also shared this information with colleagues in planning data. Ultimately, they have got 3 key goals to achieve from this data set. So number 1, where the condition applies, i.e. the geographic data, the area that's covered by the condition. Number 2, how the condition applies. So does it affect the whole building, just part of the building or something else? And then number 3, what the condition actually imposes. So what exactly has been restricted as part of those conditions. From what we understand, it's relatively easy to input the geographical data into the system, and PlanX can then flag up if a condition applies. But it is slightly more complicated to then understand the details of that condition, what developments it could affect, and then how to flag that in the PlanX editor's flows. So in 2024, we'll be continuing work on this alongside our plans to upgrade to PlanX's application services. We also plan to use Report a Breach service that's under development, and we're also closely following the great work that Camden and TPX Impact are doing on the digital site notices project. And that's it from me, Chanel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to hand over to PlanX to go through a little bit more of their presentation and what they've been doing.
Yes, I'll start on this. So householder planning permission applications, I'm going to talk a bit about our current areas of focus on the service. Next slide, please. So just for a very brief context overview, when we talk about householder applications, we're talking about applications that relate to physical changes made to a home. So these are things like extensions, alterations, outbuildings. It's a high priority service, principally because it is the single most common application type. And we have three, I want to talk about three our current areas of focus, and that is project navigation, document requirements, and documents as data. I will explain a bit what that means in a bit. Next slide, please. So one of the areas of focus, or one of the challenges that we're dealing with, is allowing the user and making it as easy as possible to navigate their project selection. So for context, there's a large number of projects that an applicant could apply under, and the service needs to understand what these projects are in order to ask the right questions, require the correct documents, send the user the right notices. But the user also needs to be able to understand where and how to select these projects. And because there are so many of them that could sit under their application, this becomes a bit complicated. You see on the far left there of the pictures, some of the iterations that we went through in trying to address this issue. And you see that there are around 10 categories of projects. And in each of these categories, if you would be able to click the little accordion button there, you would see that there are like 10 or more projects sitting under each of these. So roughly 100 of these projects that the user would need to look through and select their projects off. What we've done so far is we've worked in that existing structure, trying to both improve the categorization of the projects that sit in these categories, make them more aligned with what users would be expecting, their mental models, but also we try to restructure the selection in that we might present the user a certain number of projects that are most common and then put the other projects that might be rare on different pages. But this is, like user research shows us that this is continuing to be a large struggle for users. So in the long term, we're planning on implementing the text input feature that allows the user to describe their project, and then on the back end we try to understand as much as we can on a machine readable level, as in defined categories that these projects would sit in. And then instead of asking the user to select their projects, we can present the user a recommendation based on what they have told us, what the system is able to understand from their description. So a much easier way for the user to navigate this. And we currently already captured that description. So realistically, we might remove this select your project step then completely, just ask the user to describe your project. Here's this suggested list, and they can always then suggest changes to that list. Next slide, please. Another area of focus and the big challenge that we're dealing with is document requirements. And there's two elements to this. One is that we provide the right guidance to the user about these documents, make sure that what they submit is correct. But then also there's a second level to this, which is we need to be sure that the service knows what these requirements actually are. To the first one, there is a challenge here in that we don't just address one user group, right? As in, this service is open to anyone who wants to apply for a householder application, and that can be homeowners themselves, but it could also be agents that apply on behalf of homeowners, and they have very different requirements, very different needs when it comes to this guidance. So a homeowner, for example, might need general guidance on what these documents would look like, what is a plan, what is an elevation drawing, and whereas an agent might be interested in more specific information because they have a general understanding, but they might want to, is this application in the London borough, and if so, do I need to know, the amount of bike spaces, parking spaces, EPC certificates, and so on. The second challenge there is requesting the right validation requirements, and the issue here is that the legislation on this is not really crystal clear, and there are national requirements that we could make the baseline for all of the application services, but really most of the documents that are required for an application to allow the officer to make sense of what this application is about are local requirements, and they might differ between different councils. And mapping that out and making sure that we cover all of these is a challenge. So what we've done so far is we have implemented additional guidance that is targeted to the particular user group. So if a homeowner, for example, uses the service, just before they get to the upload documents section, they're presented with a structured overview of guidance on what these documents would look like. We have also, since we updated the new document submission function, where we now show a list of required and suggested documents to the user. All of these individual documents have their own help section that further specify what would be required in these documents. And again, we can make this information conditional, as in we maybe not show it to agents who might be well aware of what the site plan would need to look like, but to homeowners. And in the future, what we're planning is that we integrate this more both on the landing pages that a user would see before they go into the service, but perhaps also as a standalone service to give us some information about the project, and then we can show them targeted information about the documents that they might need to submit. Next slide, please. The last area of focus I want to talk about is documents as data. And what I mean with this is we want to allow the user to provide us the information that would normally be included in a report or a statement, like a heritage statement, as data directly in the service. And this has a few advantages. One of them is that the user, if they have, say, a listed building, if the user would be capable of providing that information themselves, they don't need to go to an expert to get that report written. It allows the officers to see the information directly structured in whatever back office system they receive it in. The issue there is that, yes, we want to allow the users to self-submit these statements, but we also want to avoid invalid submissions. And some of these statements, it's feasible for the user to provide that information, but for something like a contamination report, for example, we want to avoid suggesting to the user that they could do that realistically themselves. Currently, we're working or focusing on heritage statements for this. It's an interesting area because there are 4 different assets that we need to cover with this, but again, Planex can conditionally ask what these assets would be, so listed building, conservation area, scheduled monument, and so on. And then ask specific questions relating to these. What we want to do in the future is that we provide more structure to these inputs. So right now we ask the user on one page, describe the listed building, and then continue, describe how it affects the conservation area and so on. What we want to do there instead is to provide a more structured tabular, for example, overview that is more granular in what information we require from the user, so as to be crystal clear in what is required and what the user needs to provide in each section. And there's also a consideration that we might filter that further on the applicant type. So similar to the discussion about an agent and a homeowner, we would here think, what is the size of the project? Is it feasible for a large extension and so on for the user to describe the impact on the conservation area and so on. Those are the 3 areas. There are 2 general kind of challenges that I want to briefly talk about when it comes to designing these systems. So next slide, please. One is striking a balance between usability and validity. When you design a digital planning service like this, you could design it like you see on the left side there, which is we ask the user to describe the application and we thank them for the application. This would be very easy. Anyone could complete this. The reality is none of these applications would be valid. You can also design the system, as you see on the right there, which is, by the way, a real screenshot from a part of one of our flows, and make it so hard that every application that comes through is valid, but no one can complete it. But you want to be both, right? You want to have it easy to be completed, but also valid. So striking that balance between usability and validity is one of the challenges that we're dealing with. The good thing is that one of Planex's strengths is that we can automate and make these questions conditional. So most of the questions that you see on the right-hand side of the example here is not actually anything that the user would ever be shown, as in the system knows this and triages and filters based on what we know about the application, so that we only ask the user questions that we need to know and cannot otherwise figure out, and also only ask questions that are relevant to the particular application and project type of the user. Next slide, please. The second thing I want to mention here is striking a balance between experts and lay people. I mentioned this briefly before in the question around guidance for document types. But I just want to flag it again that this is a general challenge, that when you design a system like an application, digital application form, and you want to target multiple audiences, you want to make sure that the information that is shown to these audiences and the questions that are asked to them, as in the information required from them, is specific to whatever they need to know or can provide. So I created a little table here to highlight some of these. So for example, agents would want to have an efficient system that is, very efficient to use, quick to go through, whereas homeowners might need a lot of substantial guidance that might, for an agent that knows a lot of this information, might seem like a roadblock, whereas a homeowner might very much need it. Similarly, an agent might need to have detailed information. I mentioned EPC certificates and so on, whereas a homeowner wants to have very basic kind of understanding and guidance on what some of these like definitions, projects and so on would look like. Similar agents might have a lot of planning knowledge, but might not know a lot about the site or the property in particular, whereas homeowners might have a lot of property knowledge, but no planning knowledge, and balancing providing that information and requesting that information, here again, a challenge. And also agents enter the service with a lot of expectations because they have a lot of experience and expertise. And we want the service to match that expectation and not ask questions in structures that they're not used to. Whereas with homeowners, we need to first set this expectation, as in provide them a lot of guidance at the outset of the service, that they know what the service is about and what will be required from them. Again, one of Planex's strengths here is that it's a responsive service, as in it captures information from the user and then presents the user with very tailored content that is only relevant to them if the system knows it is, and then shown to them or not shown to them. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, August. That was brilliant. Right, so moving on. We've got the ODP schema.
Yeah, good morning. There we go. Yeah, good morning. I'm Jess. I work on Planex. I am presenting, though, sort of our integration strategy and some work around what we're calling the Open Digital Planning Schema, or sort of data specification, very much on behalf of ODP, and especially also, I think, the planning data team at Deluc. This has been very collaborative work. So integrations relate specifically to Planex submission services. So these are all of our apply for services and how we are able for Planex to submit applications to back office systems. What we have learned sort of, I think, through our public beta phase, maybe like the last year and a half or so, integrating with back office systems, is that there can be a lot of challenges around officers having a consistent experience evaluating applications. And this is largely because, like, currently Planex sends sort of different payload shapes to different back office systems because that's what they expect. And oftentimes those shapes only capture sort of like a sliver of all of the application data that we actually have available about what the applicant's experience was and all of the context associated with their application. Next slide, please. As we go into 2024, we know that we are sort of reevaluating and refactoring our integration strategy with a few key suppliers, being the BOPS back office system, as well as iDocs products. So Uniform and iDocs Cloud and Tascomi are coming under this sort of new product of iDocs called Nexus. And as we have this opportunity, we really see it as an interesting moment to think about a shared data standard for how we talk about planning applications. And as sort of part of the ODP community, we are really sort of trying to frame this as how could all suppliers and back office systems perhaps start thinking about applications in a new way in anticipation of like a shared planning register coming forward and requirements we know that we'll have around that. So what is the ODP schema right now? It is a document that talks about the variables and rules that describe a planning application. And these variables and rules are used to sort of determine if the application we send is valid or not, as we sort of know at that point in time. And it determines the shape of sort of like the payload of data that we can actually send. As of right now, PlanX is using the ODP schema to exchange or send planning applications. We are testing with BOPS already. We are in planning with Nexus and the Submissions API, and we're very excited to be exploring other back office systems, especially like NEC and the Digital Site Notices project are on our radar going into 2024. And the ODP schema is very much, when we talk about data specifications, I really want to stress that this is something that is iterative and will evolve over time. And DLUC is sort of like the governing party that helps us convene collaboration and stakeholders and improvements and enhancements to the schema over time. Next slide, please. So our design principles that we are thinking about as we think about this new data specification for planning applications. Our priorities here have been that it's open and interoperable. So any system independent of the technologies you're using can access this schema. It's sort of language agnostic. It can be version controlled. This means that we know how the shapes of applications are changing over time, and it ensures that we can be sort of backwards compatible as well. Backwards compatible meaning that we have existing ways that submissions work, and we want to make sure that the new schema still satisfies all of those and then thinks about how to enhance them. Modular and additive. This again is sort of how do we enhance existing payloads and also start to capture modularity sort of refers to, as we heard August talk about, PlanX services, one of their really key values is they ask a lot of conditional questions based on what we know about your journey as an applicant. So how do we make sure that your payloads can also reflect sort of those rules that are tied to the types of conditional questions? So if you're doing a certain type of application, we expect that your payload is required to have these types of data, but if it doesn't apply to a different type of application, then those are optional, etc. More structured data and less free text. We think this is really, really important in order to help move from documents to data and a much more like sort of digital planning world. Human legible. So this is like an interesting balance, I think, when we think of what does more structured data mean, as well as making sure that how we explain planning applications, it can make sense to applicants and officers alike, and the folks who are designing the actual services themselves, and what's sort of the middle ground of like a shared language that all of those folks are using to talk about the same thing of a planning application. Rules-based, so again, the same logic and dependencies and validation requirements that can be built into sort of the PlanX graphs when you're building services can be reflected in the payloads themselves. It's auditable. This means that an officer has enough information in the payload about a planning application to basically replay the whole applicant's journey. Every question and answer that they provided in order, help text and policy references associated with those questions and why they were asked, all of the key details. And then user-led, we have gone through a lot of feedback cycles with the schema work, and it's very much informed by both what we have learned from integrating with back office systems for submission services the last few years in public beta, as well as sort of all of these new exciting projects that we know are on the horizon, like a register, like the digital site notices. How do we create a data specification that helps all of these things sort of talk consistently together? So next slide, please. what the ODP schema entails, I think an obvious question is maybe like, well, how is it going to be different or the same as a planning register, and what data we expect to live there? So we know that DLUC is also working on a data specification for planning applications, which will be sort of a mandatory core set of data that registers must publish about applications. A way that the ODP schema is different and sort of complements this requirement that we know is coming is that the ODP schema is the snapshot of an application at the point of submission. So it doesn't have a status yet. It won't have a decision associated with it yet. And it's always going to be a much sort of larger subset of data than what we expect to see on a register. There's perhaps going to be like more personal identifiable data that wouldn't eventually get published to a register, but officers need to work with applicants, etc. But all of sort of, there's this mandatory core set of things that are sort of in perfect alignment and map one to the other. Oh, perfect. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what you can expect on our integrations roadmap. The last couple of months, we have developed sort of version 0.0 of an ODP schema with input from key stakeholders. This is open source already, and there's public documentation on GitHub for it. Feedback is very welcome. What it has also meant for us in developing sort of like the ODP schema, like the actual JSON technical specification itself, we've also put together a lot of resources, like what we call migration guides, of how sort of our existing integrations map to the new, the new ODP schema proposal. BOPS began work to accept the ODP schema, and we're beginning technical planning with IDOCS. Right now, this month in December, as of this week, I'm very excited to say that BOPS and OSL are officially sort of exchanging staging environment applications using the new ODP schema shape. And we're doing this across lawful development certificates, both proposed and existing, prior approvals for extensions, and then householder planning permission applications. IDOCS is beginning development this month. We are working really closely with DLUC and the planning data team of researching opportunities for shared data dictionaries. So these are sort of topics like, how do we make sure we're all, what is sort of like the universe of all the statutory application types? How do we make sure we have a common way of talking about that list? What are common document types, etc. What we expect early next year, IDOCS and OSL will be testing the new integration with hopes of launching for a number of councils in the ODP community who are either using Uniform or IDOCS Cloud to SCOME by March. Really exciting. OSL will be prototyping sort of editor validation features. So how do PlanX service designers actually interact with the data specification? How do we make sure that when you're building and publishing services, you're not breaking submission integrations, etc.? Show you warnings. We'll be having conversations with a lot of other stakeholders in the space and trying to understand, both like encouraging them to adopt it, understanding perhaps challenges to adoption, ways that we can improve the schema based on that feedback. We very much expect that as we talk to other projects, right now the ODP schema is for describing planning applications, but we know that there are a lot of other topics that would benefit from sort of shared data standards in this space, like reference numbers, consultations, site visits, etc. And yeah, and it again, really stressing that this work is very much iterative and will be responding to new legislative requirements as it comes, the same way that we think about PlanX services. They are never really static at a point in time. And that's what I have today. Thank you.
Amazing. Mike?
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Mike, one of the developers at PlanX, and today I'll be talking a bit more about analytics. Next slide, please. So why we track user analytics. Currently, we create analytics sessions to track user behavior as they progress through services. Analytics data is anonymous and therefore available over the whole lifespan of a service. This allows us to see trends and gain insight into user behavior so we can make informed decisions on potential improvements. Next slide, please. So on that note, here we've got a case study of where we've done this. So based on user research, we're finding that users sometimes need help on certain pages, and there's a help button, but they're not clicking it. So as part of this, there was work to implement a new help button. When this was launched, we investigated with our analytics tool, Metabase, and it was found that when the new design was launched at the end of September, that although the number of times the help button was clickable stayed the same, the number of times it was clicked actually reduced. So this suggested to us that it wasn't performing as anticipated and informed our product decision because we're now working on new designs. Next slide, please. So the current analytics data is very useful to us, but we're expanding on what data is gathered. These new metrics are based on the performance framework driven by the metrics working group. And additionally, we're updating our permissions model around analytics to support access to data by more user groups. Next slide, please. So the items listed here were all pulled from the performance framework. As you can see, the majority of the work is being completed and the data to support these metrics is now being gathered. There's still kind of ongoing work, but we're making great progress. Next slide, please. So I'd like to give a wee bit more context about how we kind of manage our analytics and what this means for stakeholders. So currently, users navigate through services. We collect that anonymous data. We then use this tool Metabase, where we kind of gather insights, build charts and things. And then we will display this information to councils on their dashboards through this kind of public view. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So this kind of gives a kind of a rough idea of these sorts of views. You might be familiar with it if you looked at it before. So here, this is like a little clip from a public view of a dashboard for find out if you need planning permission. So the charts that make up this dashboard, you can hover over them for more information. You can kind of browse around, but it's relatively limited what you can do. You can't really edit them or get too much more detail. Could we move to the next slide, please? So what we're hoping to do is expand our access so that councils and other stakeholders would be kind of further upstream of where we have this data and would directly be able to access Metabase. So we're currently onboarding a representative from the metrics working group to Metabase. And what we'd like to do is provide access to kind of different stakeholders to their dashboards to be able to kind of view, copy charts, collaborate. And if we move to the next slide, we can get a little snippet of what this could look like. So here, rather than that public view, we're directly looking on Metabase here. So this would be like a dashboard. Users could potentially directly download data from charts, so they could use their own tools if they want to further analyze it. They'd be able to look onto their dashboards, maybe add new charts, move things around, add help text, and also potentially pose their own questions using Metabase's kind of inbuilt kind of graphic user interface for asking questions. Next slide, please. So the kind of next steps for this work, we're finalizing the remaining tickets in this phase. We're expanding access to Metabase, and as I mentioned, we're already onboarding a metrics group representative, and any kind of follow-up work is still to be prioritized. And that's me. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody from Planex. That was absolutely brilliant. What I will do next is, now we've got Deluxe highlights from 2023. Matt, are you here?
Hey, Chanel. Yep, thanks so much. Yeah, I'm going to kind of give a bit of a run through from a slightly higher level than some of the other speakers have so far, and a bit of a review of some of the main milestones, I suppose, from the last year. So if we were to cast our minds all the way back to January in the next slide, there was once a time when we had a particular housing minister. I don't know how many housing ministers ago this was, but we went up to Buckinghamshire Council. They came with us, did this amazing visit, and so thanks so much to the team from Buckinghamshire that were involved in this to really showcase what these products were doing at that point in time. And what was fantastic about that conversation was not just how the minister engaged in things, but how it gave a really clear ministerial level kind of bit of interest and recommendation on where they thought this work should be going, and a lot of you might remember this, that off the back of that, I think I came to all the product teams and was saying, okay, we really need to have householder applications ready to be launched by the end of 2023. And so it's just fantastic to reflect on like how galvanizing that has been over the last year, and where we are at the moment with these products like ready to launch and to really begin to scale. So that was a really useful intervention, and yeah, I'm sure other councils in the next year or two might be invited to host a ministerial visit. So I would say, yeah, maybe someone from Buckinghamshire can talk about how things benefited them, but really great contributions from people there. The other really significant thing to shout about on the next slide, and to just remind people and say congratulations again around, was that we won for Open Digital Planning the Digital Change Project of the Year from the Government Project Delivery Awards. So, you know, thanks so much also to Emily, to Freya, to Greg for coming along and celebrating that with us back in March. That was brilliant. And so some other kind of more high level things, I suppose. Next slide, please. I think really the significant thing for me has been how back in last December 2022, we kind of launched the Open Digital Planning overarching brand for the project, after getting so much stick about having two acronyms smushed together and calling this thing Ripper and Bops, and recognizing that probably wasn't scalable. Defining a vision with everyone and having that brilliant launch event last December in the top of the South Bank Centre. And really, I think things have been expanding. So from February, March, and really kicking off properly in about May time, we welcomed 19 new funded councils doing different projects into the fold, who I know have been moving at different paces, but have all been contributing greatly to the overall mission that we're all working on. And that's really, I think, encouraged that pivot away from being a project team and towards a wider community. So what's been happening over the last year are some significant things like these in-person team days. This is the picture from Gloucester, where I couldn't go, but I'm reliably told it was the best one. But everyone says that after every single one. So that was great. The introduction of lunch and learn sessions, I think, has been really well received over the last few months. That's looking at things like user-centered design, content design, and user research, and helping people understand how they apply within the projects that are funded, but also how they could apply elsewhere in their jobs. And the continuation of these show and tells, which are typically getting between 60 and 90 people each month. So that's just really like demonstrating that there's an appetite for these things. So thanks to all of you for continuing to show up, and thanks to those of you that continue to present and share things in them. Next slide, just a quick nod to the comms that's been going on. The Open Digital Planning website launched at the end of last year, but this year, and in large part thanks to Christine, our comms lead, there's been a real uptick in terms of social media presence. So please do follow our LinkedIn channel. See if I've still got the link copy. Just put it into the chat here. That's really active now, and it's the best place to keep up to date with kind of regular updates, I would say. Then you have the show and tells every month, and the website is updated less frequently. So please follow that and join that community if you're interested. Slack use has been really fascinating to watch, just in terms of how quickly that's increased. Of course, there's more people, but the top graph with that top line that's the one in green is the number of weekly active users, and so that's been consistently growing. So thanks to everyone who's part of that, using it as a really convenient platform for regular communications. I think it's something that supports the community to grow and the projects to be delivered at pace. And there's an absolutely absurd number of messages that have been sent since 2019. Don't know what it's been in the last year, but that's been growing and growing as well. Next slide, please. Another significant introduction was really in evolving the work to support onboarding, and with great thanks to everyone who's part of the adoption and onboarding working group within the wider Open Digital Planning project. I know it's a bit separate to the product teams, but you've done a great job of informing this, and the teams led by definitely Max, Katie and Rich have done just a great job of pulling this Notion page together, this one-stop resource hub for anyone who wants to find out things, if you're a funded council, on what you might need to do, access to resources, next steps and things. We're always hoping to evolve this and improve it based on your feedback. So if you're looking for opportunities to give that sort of feedback then, and you're not sure where to go, then best person to reach out to at the moment, I would say, is Max Smith or Chanel. So tap one of them up, please. And then lastly, on the kind of look back, I think the other most significant step forward of the last 12 months, next slide, please, is just much better engagement with the industry from across the work. So Jess has been talking about the really proactive work that's been done to kind of lay the groundwork for real integrations, because the main objective here is that open digital planning is not just like a noun. It's not just the name of a project, but it's actually what we're building, which is an open digital planning ecosystem where all products can interoperate and work together much more easily. So really good proactive conversations going on with iDocs and Planning Portal from Box and PlanX teams at the moment. Hopefully they can expand out to other service providers, and several active projects with other significant industry players as well, the likes of Objective, of Arcus Global, of Agile Applications, NEC. Def, I could go on, sorry for missing out names if anyone's on the call. A final thing to say on this is that DLUC has been convening since the Summer and Industry Working Group as well, which is slightly separate to open digital planning at the moment. It'd be interesting to see how those things could move closer together in the future. But that's also been just a really welcome opportunity to have more regular dialogue with people in the industry, especially around things like the planning data standards that are coming in the future, again, that Jess was alluding to. So my next slide is just a nice quick one on a bit of a forward look. Sorry, one more, Chanel. And I think these are the things to look forward to from my perspective in 2024. So excited to finally see the digital site notice project getting up and running again. I know it's been a long time in the making of the sort of procurement office in Camden. So it's just great that this is getting going, and with some really exciting plans for how this could become scalable and relevant to all parts of the ecosystem by expanding beyond just the site notice component and looking at a public index across all planning application types. Here at the team in DLUC's been working on digital planning maturity assessment, work led by Nish, but I know that lots of project partners have been involved in shaping this, and that many of you have already completed this. So this is going to be a real kind of first entry point to new councils that we're working with to help people baseline where their planning services are and where there are opportunities for improvement in the future. We will be seeing more councils joining this as this starts to really evolve into more of a community. We're going to be funding, I don't know how many yet, we're assessing applications at the moment after our funding round closed last week, and it's going to be at least 30, I would imagine, and possibly more, so that's going to be exciting. But they're going to be on a different pathway. They're going to be starting by looking at individual service improvements within their organisation before they start to approach specific software and digital service challenges. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out and what lessons everyone can glean from that. Those councils will join Open Digital Planning, and we're really conscious that at the moment the only way you can join is by receiving funding from DLUC, and that's it's not as fair as we'd like it to be. So I hope that coming later in 2024, can't promise that it'll be too early, that we'll be looking at how that community opens up and welcomes any local authority that wants to sign up to be part of this, to have access to things like the resource hub, the maturity assessment, the Slack channels, and just be a bit more involved in getting support from the network. Probably what's going to happen, therefore, off the back of it, will be more regional in-person events. Great to hear Duncan already plugging his for later in this year. We're all looking forward to going up to Newcastle at some point. And then there's going to be much more noise coming out of DLUC now that the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act has passed. So definitely on the data standards side, and then hopefully through proactive conversations with key people in the industry around updated APIs that start to bring that open digital planning vision of the ecosystem into practice. Thanks so much. Chanel, back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the very last show and tell of 2023. I am aware there are some questions in the Slack channel, and also there are some questions flying around elsewhere. But what I will do is I will transfer all of them into the Show Tell Slack channel, and I will ferry them out to the people responsible, and hopefully we'll get an answer in the Show and Tell Slack channel, as we are swiftly running out of time. But yeah, it just remains for me to say thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for your updates. Absolutely brilliant to see everybody doing so well this year. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I will see you in 2024. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.